In this video, I'm going to show how to analyze a race from video. This analysis is based on a paper from 2002 by Smith and colleagues called Performance Evaluation of Swimmers. And the reason that you would do this is basically twofold. First, you want to be able to break the race down into its components, so the start, the turns, and the clean swimming, and see how you compare or your swimmer compares to the top swimmers or their top competitors. And then the second reason would be to be able to compare yourself to yourself. So if you identify an area of the race that you want to work on, then you can analyze the race one time and then analyze it again after you've tried to improve upon those things and see how your performance has changed in that particular phase of the race as well as the overall time. So I'm going to go through and show you how I do this. Basically, I was looking at a video of a swimmer from that was taken from the stands. So the video was just panning left to right. And so it can be a little bit challenging to figure out exactly where the swimmer is in the pool at a given time point, but that's a limitation of the vantage point, and you just do your best. So here's the data. Anything that's in blue was just something that I took from the official meet results. And then the stuff in yellow is what I extracted from video, and the cells in green were calculated from equations in Excel. So the first thing that I did was to figure out how far this swimmer was breaking out based on where her head was surfacing, and then what time, based on the timestamp in the video, what time in the race she was breaking out. So I did that for each lap, got the breakout time and the breakout distance, and also counted the strokes on each lap. And so from the breakout time and breakout distance, I was able to calculate her underwater speed for each of the laps. And then from the breakout time and breakout distance, I was also able to figure out what amount of time and distance she spent doing what's called clean swimming. So that would be stroking above the water. So the clean swimming was the lap split minus the breakout time, and the clean swimming distance was just the 50-meter pool minus the breakout distance. So these values aren't particularly meaningful, except that they allow us to calculate the clean swimming speed, which is the distance divided by the time. So we can figure out how fast she is when she's swimming above water and how fast she is when she's swimming below water. And you can see that there's about a 0.3 meter per second difference between above water and underwater, which makes sense because we know underwater swimming's faster. Next, I can calculate the stroke length based on the clean swimming distance divided by the stroke count. So she was swimming about 40 to 44 meters per lap above water, and she was taking about 22 to 25 strokes. So that distance divided by the count gives her a stroke length of about 1.8. You can get the stroke rate by dividing the stroke count by the clean swimming time. It's usually expressed as a number of strokes per minute. So we multiply that by 60. And so she was taking an average of 50 strokes per minute. The way that tempo trainers are usually set are the inverse of that. So instead of strokes per unit time, it's seconds per stroke. So when you divide the clean swim time by the stroke count, you get the tempo. And so her average here was about 1.2. Another way to analyze the start and the turns is to look at the time to 15 meters and the time from the flags to the wall to the 10 meter for turns. So that's just an alternative to looking at just the underwater and the breakout. And so I did that here and calculated those times. The one thing that I should mention is that when you're looking at the underwater speed, at least the way that I did it, I'm timing it from the touchpad to the breakout. And so that includes the time from the touchpad to the push-off. Ideally, I would just be looking at push-off to head surfacing, breakout, but the video is not clear enough to be able to see when that happens, and it's also happening pretty quickly. Usually the touchpad to push-off is half a second to a second. But so the underwater speeds that I'm showing here are including that touchpad to push off time, so she's probably a little bit faster than what these times are actually showing. So all of this information is great, but without context, it's hard to know where she's performing well and where she's falling short. So to figure that out, I also analyzed the races of 3 of her competitors. And so she was 2:10 in this 200-meter race. Her competitors were 2:07. So she was about 3 seconds slower. And so I went through and broke down at each phase to see where she was losing those 3 seconds. So her reaction time was about the same, so not too much of a difference there. But when you get into the underwaters, you can see that she was breaking out about 2.8 meters earlier on the start. So that's a loss right there of about 0.7 seconds. And she was also breaking out about 2.5 meters earlier during each turn, which equates to about 0.8 seconds lost over the course of 3 turns. And that's just because, again, clean swimming is slower than underwater kicking. When you add up the fact that her underwater speed was actually about 4/100ths of a meter per second slower, that sets her back another 0.3 of a second. So basically on her underwaters, she's losing a total of 1.8 seconds. Now, when we look at clean swimming, her speed was only 1/100th of a meter per second slower than her average competitors. But when you spread that out over the 160 or 170 meters of clean swimming over the course of a 200-meter race, that adds up to 1.1 seconds overall. And because clean swimming the speed is a function of the stroke length and stroke rate, I can actually figure out which is impacting that slower velocity. So when you look at her stroke length, it's actually longer than her competitors. And then when you look at her stroke rate, it's slower than her competitors by about 4 strokes per minute. And so that means that the difference, this 1.1 seconds that she's losing in clean swimming, is due to having this lower stroke rate. So what I then did actually was I analyzed her 100-meter race for this stroke. And what I found was that her tempo was higher and she was maintaining the same stroke length. So my primary recommendation for her, because she's able to maintain her stroke length with a faster stroke rate, is to try to get her tempo up. So to try to get that 1.2 down closer to maybe not 1.1, because basically even within these top 3 competitors, they all swam the race a little bit different. So some had a faster tempo, some had a slower tempo. So it's not, you can't just say, oh, we're going to strive to look this particular way, because everybody swims a little bit differently. So my primary recommendations for this swimmer were to try to stay under about 1 to 2 kicks longer. She's not going to be the type of swimmer who's going to go almost 10 or 15 meters on every underwater, but she can at least try to get that a little bit longer and try to kick a little bit harder during the time that she is underwater to try to increase that underwater velocity slightly. One thing that her coach had noticed was that she was spending a lot of time on that push-off on the wall touch to the push-off. And so if she can get that time down, maybe if she's at a second now, to get it closer to a half a second, that's going to save her a lot of time in the race. And then from a tempo standpoint, just trying to get that tempo closer to an average of 1.16 or 1.17, which might look like going out in the same 1.15, settling into a 1.2, and then building back down to the 1.15 over the 50s. So another way to visualize this data would be with graphs. So I'll show you that here. So basically, a lot of the same information is coming through here. Her clean swimming speed was third fastest on every lap except for the second compared to these three competitors. Her stroke count was always the first or second lowest, which corresponded to her stroke length being longest on every lap, her tempo being slowest on every lap. For her turns, she was slower from the flags to the walls to the 10 meters on every lap than her competitors. Her underwater speed was pretty similar, except on the fourth lap where her competitors tended to increase slightly and she decreased. And then her underwaters were shorter on every lap. So hopefully this is helpful and you can apply some similar strategies to analyzing your swimmers' races with championship season coming up. Please let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.